chairman of the board of Caribbean New Media Network. The new chairman is Mr. Timothy Alfonso, who previously served as the vice chairman, and the board includes Ms. Alice Borrell, who returns, Ms. Lida Ali, who returns, Ms. Jenian Polida, an accountant, and Ms. Adana Castellano Jones, human resource manager. With that announcement, I would hand you over to the Honorable Minister of Finance, who has some announcements to make. Thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon. I've come to this media conference just to clarify issues. Firstly, let me clarify the issues with respect to the release of funds by the European Union for payments to cane farmers. I have checked again today. You will recall at the last press conference I confirmed that the funds had not been received from the European Union, and I checked with the Ministry of Finance officials and the Ministry of Planning officials this morning before I came to Cabinet, and they have confirmed that the funds have not been released. So the statement made by the opposition leader yesterday or the day before that the funds have been released is not true. So I just thought I would clear that up. I also want to deal with the ArcelorMittal matter. I will be meeting with the Steelworkers Union on Friday. I have sent an invitation to the union to meet with me on Friday morning, and I've also sent an invitation to the company to meet with me also on Friday morning. And on Monday, I will have a detailed press conference advising on the outcome of those discussions with the Steelworkers Union and representatives of ArcelorMittal. I can answer some questions on this matter later on in this press conference if you so wish. You are aware, of course, that the International Monetary Fund was in Trinidad and Tobago for Article 4 consultations over the last 10 days or so. We had our end of mission meeting with them on Tuesday afternoon, and the International Monetary Fund, the IMF, has issued a statement, a press release. It's on the IMF website, so it's posted there, so you can go to the website to get the press release. It's dated March 17th, which is today. And again, I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have on the statements made by the IMF with respect to their visit and in terms of what the government is doing, how they view the actions being taken by the government, and their recommendations in terms of what we in Trinidad and Tobago need to do to weather the storm created by the collapse of commodity prices. Although I saw this morning that West Texas Intermediate has gone over $40, the view is that it's too volatile at this point to take much comfort in that. We have to assume that oil prices will be depressed until and unless there's some clear signals coming out from OPEC. And finally, I'd like to address a statement made by the leader of the opposition with respect to Mr. Brooks, the chairman of NGC. Now, Mr. Brooks is very capable of taking care of himself. But since the matter was raised by the opposition leader, former Prime Minister, former Attorney General, I thought I would just state the facts that it has been the practice for at least 20 years, maybe longer, that the chairman of NGC would also chair the major subsidiaries of NGC. And I also checked today, and that the former chairman, Mr. Chedi Singh, also chaired several subsidiaries of NGC and also received the stipend for these subsidiaries. And the opposition leader, who was a former Prime Minister and former Attorney General, should know this. And therefore, to give the impression that this is something new is mischievous. I would also say that this government is reviewing these arrangements to see whether it is appropriate that chairmen of boards that have subsidiaries and associated companies should also get stipends for serving on the boards of those companies, those associated companies and subsidiaries. But in the particular case of NGC, because of the condition of that company with the failed Beetham wastewater plant, the drastic reduction in revenues, the fact that the company seemed to have lost its way, getting involved in building recreation grounds and that sort of thing, that we think it's important that the new chairman, for the time being, chair the major subsidiaries until a new CEO has been recruited, which is being done using a fair and transparent process. But we are going to review this practice that has existed, as I said, for at least 20 years, that chairmen of state corporations that have subsidiaries also chair the subsidiaries. And I would now answer any questions that you may have on these matters. No questions? That is the practice. That's the same thing with First Citizens Bank. When Nairi Afonso was chairman of FCB, she also chaired several of the subsidiaries of FCB. Anthony Smart chairs several of the subsidiaries of FCB. These are people appointed under the past administration. It's common practice. It's standard practice. That's why I'm disappointed that the opposition leader, who, as I said, was a former Prime Minister and Attorney General, would be so mischievous. But we are reviewing it. The new government is reviewing it to see whether it's correct and proper for the chairman of these state enterprises to also chair the subsidiaries and also receive stipends for their work on these subsidiary companies.
What is the quantum of the stipend? Is per calculation correct that it would be?
I don't think so. I can't give you an exact. I heard 100,000. I'm pretty sure that's wrong. I can't give you the exact figure. Some of them would be nominee companies that would meet once a year. The stipend might be $2,000 or $3,000. Others might be more substantial subsidiaries where the stipend might be $5,000. I can't give you a total. But what I can tell you is that we think it's very important for Mr. Brooks to chair the subsidiaries of NGC, which would include Labidco, Phoenix Park, the National Energy Corporation, and so on, because of the condition that company was in. It completely lost its way, for example, with the Beetham wastewater project. But to give you a total, no, I can't give you a total. But I want to emphasize that we were reviewing this practice in the context of the modern era, should we continue this practice that has been in existence for at least 20 years.
I think also in fairness to the opposition leader, she was raising it in the context of his continued tenure at the Law Association as well. So I think
that's a matter for them. That's a matter for the Law Association. But I just wanted to make the point that there's nothing new about this. You know, you could get the impression, listening to Ms. Besessa, that this is something that suddenly happened with the advent of the PNM government on September 7th, and that this was not the practice during her tenure as Prime Minister. I just wanted to clear that up. It was the practice under her tenure, and we are reviewing it as a new government to see whether it's appropriate for the chairman of one of these state enterprises to chair the subsidiaries and also receive a stipend.
As far as your meeting on Friday,
yes.
How would it be different? I know the Labour Minister has met the state workers.
Mm-hmm.
So your intervention is coming on the basis of what?
Okay. This thing is very complicated, and that's why I'm having a press conference on Monday just to deal with it specifically. I could just deal with some preliminary matters here today. In Trinidad and Tobago, we do not have legislation similar to Chapter 11. Now, in the United States, when a company goes into Chapter 11, it continues to do business. Its excused from having to deal with past creditors and past bills and debt. It just pays its current bills. Now, when a company gets Chapter 11 protection, it allows it to keep going because it's based on its inventory, based on its sales. It's able to pay its current bills and does not have the burden of debt service or liabilities. We don't have Chapter 11 legislation in Trinidad and Tobago. In fact, this thing has made it clear to me that we need to consider Chapter 11 legislation in Trinidad and Tobago so that when companies get into these kind of difficulties, they can keep going. They get the protection of the court and keep going. In Trinidad, under our bankruptcy law, you can only get the protection of the court if the creditors agree. So you have to come to an agreement with all your creditors and then go to court and get a consent order from the judge to allow the company to continue, in an insolvency situation. Chapter 11 is quite different. It allows companies to continue, keep their staff, keep their workers, and keep functioning while they get themselves out of difficulty. So it's something that we really need to look at, and I think this is where we need to go as a country. That's my preliminary view on this. So on Friday, I'm going to be establishing as a fact what the liabilities of Mittal are. Because, there have been some reports in the papers, but I can't go on that. So I will have to meet with them and find out what is the total debt of this company, what's the status of their pension plan, because pension plans are supposed to be funded. The money is supposed to be in a fund. It's supposed to be ring-fenced and protected for the benefits of the workers. So I have to get from them what's going on with their pension plan, what's going on in terms of the debt owed by the company. So that's the meeting with the company, and then meeting with the workers, of course, to find out what are their concerns. I would think they're very concerned about the pension plan. So that's a common subject of discussion I'll be having with the two entities. And what is the cost of running this company? What's the annual cost? What level of support the government has given to this company and continues to give it to it in terms of natural gas and electricity prices? What is the level of support the company requires in order to keep going? So we could look at it and make a informed decision that would be in the benefit of all concerned, the best interest of everyone concerned. So that I need to establish the facts, and I will do so on Friday, and then I'll have a press conference on Monday at 11 o'clock at the Ministry of Finance. Okay?
Just to follow up on the state's question, is that fact-finding mission because the government may be giving consideration to the proposal on the table for purchase?
One can't answer that question until you determine the facts. For example, one of the newspapers said that the plant is available for $1 in the headline, and then in the body said, oh, by the way, you have to absorb $1.3 billion in debt. So I need to find out what the facts are. What is it? What's really going on? That if this company was taken over, do you take on $2 billion in liabilities, for example? Do you run at a loss of $500 million a year? Who you're selling your product to? Because you have to understand, if the government takes over this company, and I'm not saying it is going to, you're going to be competing directly with ArcelorMittal outside there in the international market, where they are closing down companies all over the world. I don't know if you know, but over the last 3 years, they've closed steel mills in France, in Spain, in South Africa, in the United States. I think 3 steel mills were closed down that were owned by Mittal, more than 2,000 workers out of work in the United States, and so on. So that the situation in Trinidad is not unique. They have been on a program of shutting down their plants in various countries that they deem to be unprofitable. The company itself, I'm told, lost over $8 billion last year in its operations. So what's happening here is not unique to Trinidad and Tobago. They're shutting down mills all over the world and putting workers out of work all over the world. And we need to understand that. I understand it. And in my discussion with them, I'll be trying to get out of them what are the facts, what are the circumstances, so see if we could do something.
But I'm reading the IMF press release, and this one paragraph jumps out at me. It says...
Which paragraph is that? I know, but I have it in front of me. So which,
It's the paragraph that says the government has already identified additional measures, including improving tax collections.
that's on the second page, yeah.
Yeah,
Second
including,
paragraph.
gaming taxes, reintroducing property taxation. Is there a timeline for when you're going to start introducing these, given what's happening with all the workers on the bread line? Is that timeline going to be adjusted at all? What timeline are we looking at for
I can give you-
adjusting these tax rates?
I can give you the timeline, but don't understand the connection you made there between workers on the breadline and these two matters.
Workers might say that this now is not a good time to raise taxes because they're not getting money or
This has nothing to do with workers. Gaming and gambling taxes,
property taxation.
that's land and building taxes. That again, I'm not sure what that has to do with workers.
Well, can you give us an idea of the timeline?
Well, I did indicate that these will be done in this year, 2016, and we are on target. You may not know, but the Ministry of Finance has been meeting with all of the stakeholders in the gambling and gaming industry. I think they're almost finished. They met with the workers, they met with the unions that represent the workers in the gambling industry. They met with the owners. They've met with the national lotteries. They've met with the religious bodies. They've met with everybody. And I'm going to get a very comprehensive report from my staff, I would say within the next couple of weeks, on what is the feedback, so that I can then meet with the organizations that have identified concerns. But there's been widespread consultation on the gambling and gaming legislation, and I would be approaching the opposition. I've already spoken to the leader of the opposition about it, because remember, the gambling and gaming bill was introduced by the last government, so that we haven't had any detailed discussions. But I did ask her if she'd be open to some discussions on this matter. But I'm waiting for the consultations to finish before I approach the opposition formally on the gambling and gaming bill.
Any idea how much we stand to make when this new laws come into place?
Estimates are in excess of $500 million a year. That's not property tax. I'm talking about gambling. Eh? Yeah. The estimates are that between $7 and $10 billion is spent on gaming in Trinidad and Tobago per year. Billion. That's the estimates. But of course, nobody really knows because we don't have proper legislation to measure. So the estimates of the revenue that could come to this would be about $500 million a year. But again, we have to put the legislation in, start measuring the output of these entities and start collecting the tax. But these are some of the things we have to do. We have to look for new avenues to raise revenue that does not put a burden on the people at the lower end of the spectrum, because I want to make it clear, whatever measures we do, they have this burden of adjustment has to be spread across the society. It wouldn't be just one group that would be targeted.
The Prime Minister said that ArcelorMittal is TNTech's largest consumer of electricity.
Uh-huh.
What are the implications for TNTech with this closure? What are the financial implications for TNTech and for the country at large?
Well, that's the support I was talking about. I didn't want to quantify it, but the government has been giving tremendous support to Mittal in terms of the cost of electricity. So it's complex. Whereas TNTech may or may not be supplying electricity to Mittal in the near future. TNTech may no longer have to absorb the cost of supplying electricity to Mittal. Okay, I'll talk more about that on Monday. I'll explain further what that means.
Follow up to that question, Minister Ingrid, there are a lot of service companies, I think at the point leases that depend heavily, I think probably 100% on ArcelorMittal's operations to conduct their business.
Yes.
And the fear is that their closure could result in further job losses at that industrial estate and some other companies as well. Is that something you've considered?
But certainly, we have to look at the whole picture. We have to look at what it costs. We have to look at the benefits. We are doing that. I have a whole team in the Ministry of Finance looking at that, looking at the benefits of the plant and looking at the cost of the plant. You have to make an economic decision. With oil at $41, I'm sure you'll agree with me. If it was $100, it might be a no-brainer. You know, take out $2 billion from the piggy bank and just do it. But you know, it's not an easy decision to take $2 billion of taxpayers' money. Okay, it's not very easy. Not very easy. Okay.
On a slightly separate issue, the dollar depreciated today to about $6.62 to the U.S.
Uh-huh.
How much will the government allow the dollar to depreciate? Because there are concerns about its impact on the price of food and so on.
I wouldn't want to give you a definitive answer on that. The exchange rate is set by the central bank, and it's based on demand and supply and other economic factors. So the rate is being managed by the central bank.
And the reports of a black market, Minister Ramprachan, MP Ramprachan was talking about that. Have you looked into that at all?
What I didn't want to say as usual, so I won't say as usual. What he was talking about is the rate at which the cambios sell foreign exchange, and what he did not make clear, perhaps he didn't even know, that the cambios don't get foreign exchange from the central bank. They buy foreign exchange at the selling rate. So let's say, for example, a cambio is buying US dollars today. It'll buy it at 660. And then, of course, they have to make a markup on that. So that's why the cambio rate is 680, 690, or whatever the case may be. And if you did research and you go backwards in time, you will see as far back as 2014, the cambio rate was $697 because they buy foreign exchange at the selling rate in the commercial banks, and then they put their markup on it. So to say that that's a black market is a complete misconstruction of the facts. It's not. That's how cambios operate. They buy and sell off the street. So obviously, if you're buying at 660, you have to sell at 680 or 690. Okay? They won't get their foreign exchange in a normal way.
Was the issue of Miss Marlene McDonald discussed in the cabinet today?
Could you just assist my poor memory? Which media house do you work for again?
I work for CMC2.
Okay, so you saw the program last night?
I did.
I think the Prime Minister addressed that matter comprehensively.
No, but I'm asking, since his statement last night, whether or not the matter was raised at cabinet today, as a senior member of the cabinet.
Senior, is that in age? The Prime Minister is dealing with that matter, as he said last night. Yes.
For 102.1 FM. Sir, it has been established that there are certain contingencies to be met by Trinidad and Tobago on the availability of those funds for cane farmers by the European Union.
Yes.
While we await first of all, the availability of these funds
Yes.
prior to release,
Yes.
what position is Trinidad and Tobago setting itself in the context of being ready to have those funds distributed?
My understanding is that the funds are being processed. That's my understanding. But we haven't received them yet. It's a process. The local office here has to make an application to the head office of the European Union and submit the documentation with respect to the conditionalities that have to be met. And then once the European Union agrees that the conditions have been met, then they will release the funds. It's a procedure. But the fact is the funds have not been received. Those are the facts.
Also, I know that you are as the Minister of Finance, would you have, for example, the Minister of Labour accompanying you?
No. The Minister of Labour has already met with the parties with respect to labour matters. I am dealing with them from an economic perspective. So there's no requirement for the Minister of Labour to be present.
In the context of that IMF meeting that you had recently,
Yes.
are you satisfied that you have met IMF conditions, or is it going to be a tough ask for us going up the road?
Well, we don't have any conditions because we're not in an IMF program, thank God. So unlike Jamaica, which is in an IMF program, we don't have any conditions to meet. But one of the things, if you take the time to go and get the press release, you will see that the IMF has confirmed that the present government understands the economic challenges facing Trinidad and Tobago and is taking proactive action to deal with the challenges that face us with the collapse of oil prices. So I would say this is quite a favorable report that we got from the IMF, but I would ask you to judge for yourself. It's available on the website.
Any concern about our Heritage and Stabilization Fund?
No, well, you see, they speak about that. I'll give you an example. Let me read a paragraph from the press release. Despite the great challenges posed by the need to adjust to energy prices, Trinidad and Tobago still has enormous strengths, including a well-educated workforce, a stable political system, with substantial financial buffers and low, although rising, levels of public debt. Trinidad and Tobago is not in a crisis. Now, the buffers they're referring to are the Heritage and Stabilization Fund and our foreign reserves. So the IMF recognizes that we have quite a cushion. We are facing a tremendous challenge in terms of the loss of revenue, but we have buffers that will help us. So the fund is not threatened. What I would say is that because of depressed prices, the previous government and this government would not be putting any money into the fund. They didn't put any money last year. We would not be putting any this year because prices are way below. The earning from petroleum is way below what was projected. But the fund itself is fine. We had said that we're going to come to Parliament and separate the fund and have a heritage fund, which is for future generations, and a stabilization fund, which is what it's for, to stabilize the economy in times of low oil prices. I mean, I'll give you an example of Saudi Arabia. They have a huge sovereign fund with about $700 billion in it. But they've already taken $100 billion out of that. You hear the number I said? $100 billion in this fiscal year to stabilize the economy because of the shock that the low oil price is creating to the Saudi Arabian economy. Because similar to Trinidad, they have a social safety net and a lot of programs in that country that require funding. And the oil price is insufficient to allow Saudi Arabia to fund its programs. And their budget is about $250 billion, of which they're taking $100 billion out of their sovereign fund. That's what it's for. It's there in times of crisis or in times of challenge. But you have to be careful how you manage it. You've got to be careful. You can't just exhaust the stabilization fund because we don't know where commodity prices will be going in the future. We just have to be very prudent in the way we utilize this fund. Okay?
Where are we going in terms of the legislation to separate that fund?
That is going to be done this year. I am programming maybe about June for that.
A question to Minister Coffey. The newly appointed acting CEO of CNMG,
Yes.
Mr. Rogers, said the company needed about $50 million, but it was not explained what that money is for. Can you explain? Is it for upgrade of equipment? And why does CNMG need so much money?
Well, I don't think he was speaking on behalf of the board, which will determine CNMG's capital expenditure needs. I think he was having a private meeting with his staff and he speculated.
Yeah, but how much money does CNMG need? Is that something that's
The whole issue of CNMG and its operations is now before the Committee on State Enterprises. And in fact, a plan has gone forward to them. They are looking at it, and we'll wait until they comment on it and it comes back to Cabinet before we can talk more about CNMG.
Now that there's a new chairman of the board, will Mr. Rogers' position now be considered permanent? Is that the plan to make him permanent, or is he going to remain active?
He is there on a 6-month contract, and after the end of 6 months, we can look at it again. If there are no other questions, thank you all very much and see you next week.